Hello, welcome to the hardest game. My name is Ben Doughty, and I'm very happy to be joined this morning at a much earlier time than usual by former British featherweight champion, former world WBO featherweight champion, the inimitable Colin Sweet C Mcmillan. Thanks for coming, Cole. Good to see you.
Yeah, no problem. Love to be here.
It's funny. I don't, based on my memory, you haven't done loads of interviews and media since you retired, and what always thought, Colin, I was just watching some of your action just to put myself in the mood before we went live here. And you had such kind of, not cockiness, but such swagger and flavour as a boxer. But your personality is very reserved, isn't it? There's no cockiness in your day-to-day human persona at all. It's almost like, not an alter ego, I just think it's interesting. Are you aware of that you have a certain kind of, not shyness but reservedness, which is quite at odds with your old boxing style?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think I'm more of an introvert. Kind of
Yeah,
like. But when I kind of get into the ring, I think it's a time for me to express myself and do what I love doing. So it was kind of great. When I was in the ring, as soon as the bell went, a bit of a showman, trying to
yeah.
entertain people. And but outside of it, I'm kind of a quiet guy. I'm kind of like a little bit more reserved, and that's the real me.
So I mean, obviously, you must have loved Muhammad Ali when you were growing up in your formative years, and you must have also realised a long time ago that you were never going to try and imitate his style and profile outside the ring.
I think as a kid, my young inspirations were Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard.
Yeah,
Great both showmen, but both exponents of the noble art of self-defense, hitting and not being hit, but done in a really nice kind of way, really entertaining kind of way, and that's what I wanted to try and do. When I turned pro.
you first came to the consciousness of boxing fans in a mainstream sense back in the amateurs when you appeared on Henry Cooper's Golden Belt a couple of times. It was a great old series where you got to see intercity boxing competitions between young amateurs, schoolboy level, junior level. Did that change your life a bit? Because it must have reached a wide audience. I think it was Channel 4, right?
Yeah, it was actually. I mean, I was quite young at the time. I think I was about 15 or 16. But it was kind of like it was great because obviously you go into school and people know who you are, and even on the amateur
Yeah.
circuit, people start marking you out. Oh, this guy's not bad. Let's look out for him. So in a way, it is good preparation for the years to come. So I kind of realised that when fights come and when you're on TV, it's a high. Everybody wants to know you, but when it dies down, everything kind of like returns to normal. So in a way, it was a good education for me, for life after when I became world champion.
Yeah. So you came out of the Barking ABC, right? So did you go to school in Barking as well?
No, that was actually born in Hackney, moved to Stratford, then we moved to Chegwell Heath in Essex when I was about 13, 14. And one of the local lads, Michael Jennings, he used to go to Barking Boxing Club, and I think one evening, there's about four of us that we want to try and come along. We went along to the local gym, and there was an old trainer called Terry Davis, who was a great old trainer. He trained quite a few local lads who did quite well, and he took me under his wing, and I started boxing. He could see from the very outset that I was a little bit, I didn't conform to that
Talented.
natural style. Well, yeah. So kind of like I like to move, and I like to move around the ring with my hands held quite low. And at that time in British boxing, that wasn't the thing to do. Things were a lot
No.
more regimented than that. So I mean, I love that style, and he embraced it. He said, "Okay, it's working for you," and we
Yeah.
worked together. And he was my amateur trainer from my first amateur fight to my last amateur fight.
I think I remember seeing him on Henry Cooper's Golden Belt in your corner, and it looked like you had a great rapport, and he understood your style because I tried to do that Ali Sugar Ray thing as well when I was in the amateurs. I think we're similar age, and I was forever getting them to say, "Keep your hands up." Did you get other coaches trying to tell you you're going to get your head knocked off one day, son? You can't do that. It's all right
Yeah,
for Ali and Leonard, but you can't do it. Did you get that?
I definitely did. I remember going to the England squad, and I think Kevin Hickey he was the coach at the time, and he was, definitely at that time not a supporter of that kind of style. He felt you've got to keep your hands up and do things like that. So I mean at the time, it worked for me, and I love that kind of stuff, hands low and lot of movement, and yeah, it was great.
It's different now, isn't it? Because all the kids have got YouTube and they can study all these different styles. And I think when they used to talk, Colin, about the British style or the European style, I'm not sure if that exists anymore because I think everything's global. Do you think?
It most definitely. I think if you look at a lot of fighters, you know, as you say, because of TV, because of social media and that, everything's a lot more instant. So I think all even a lot of English fighters, a lot of movement, turning southpaw, hands held low.
Yeah,
I think, as you say, the world is kind of like got smaller, and
yeah.
everybody is of a similar kind of style now.
Because Barry McGuigan, I remember him saying that to get his kind of almost Latin Mexican sort of left hooking style, he said he had to get tapes that came over from America. You could order tapes off certain people where you could watch guys, great Mexican fighters and all the rest of it, because of things that you wouldn't necessarily get on British TV all the time. So that's how he forged his style by accessing tapes. But for people like yourself, it was all about Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard, I think, because they had massive exposure to them. And then, I mean, maybe other guys a bit later on, like Hector Camacho as well, maybe.
I think the guy that really kind of like inspired me, people like Pernell Whitaker,
Yeah,
Sweet Pea, tremendous fighter. Um, there was quite a few. Michael Nunn at the time was a great fighter coming through.
yeah. There's
You know,
another one.
yeah, there were so many fighters that I kind of looked at and tried to take a little bit. Wilfred Benitez was another great fighter who I love watching. There were so many good fighters over there, and I say when I turned pro, even as an amateur, I tried to take a little bit of each of them. Donald Curry, another one. There were so many good
Yeah.
fighters over there. You try and take a little bit from each of them and develop your own personal style.
Do seeing Curry dismantle Colin Jones kind of shocked me, and it made me think about the style I was trying to replicate, with the Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard isms. I saw
Mm.
Curry, who didn't move at all, who just stood in front of Jones with this tight guard, the elbows wrapped in, and he just had that fast switch. Just he'd lay back from a shot, and then he was like punching straight through Jones' defense with these really surgically accurate, like jab, cross, hook, uppercut. And it
Yeah.
made me think maybe that's an even briefly. I thought maybe that's an even better style because it was frightening.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think you got so many at that time. You had so many talented fighters, and as you say, you had Tommy Hearns holding his left hand low and coming over with the right hand. And I think any fighter, you've got to try and look at the great fighters out there and try and take a little bit from each of them and try and develop your own personal style, which is what I try to do.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The only sin would be mediocrity and being the same as everybody else. I do feel that some British coaches, sometimes, some of the coaches of my acquaintance over the years, they're looking to sometimes create something that's so similar to all their other fighters and so standard. Surely the thing that separates you and makes you special and makes you a champion and makes you stand out has to be something which deviates a little bit from the script and the textbook.
Well, most definitely. I've always instilled that you've got to try and be different. You've got to be a little bit unique. You've got your own side. You've got to be unpredictable.
Yeah,
So particularly in boxing, when people can start reading you, knowing what you're going to do, that's the time when you're going to be in trouble. You've
yeah.
always got to maintain that certain element of surprise. To do something a little bit different. You've got to be able to mix it up and vary your punches, vary your attack and defense, and that's the makings of a good fighter.
Were you always going to turn pro? Did you know that from a teenager that was always where it was headed?
I think I wanted it from an early age. I think I love boxing, as I say, Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard. They were my big inspiration. I wanted to try and follow that route. I know my parents; they were quite academic minded, so
Yeah,
they wanted me to go to university to kind of go to become a lawyer or an accountant. Those were the things
yeah.
they wanted me to try and do. And I was quite fortunate because I found something which I love doing, and I happened to be quite good at, and I was able to follow that dream and go in search of a world championship.
I could quite easily imagine you having gone down the academic path and distinguishing yourself in the world of corporate or law or whatever, because I can see why they kind of might have intended that or wanted that for you, because I think that would have been that. You know what? Some fighters, you get this sense, and certainly they reinforce it with their opinions on the situation that was their way out of obscurity and poverty and the working class environment, and that was the only shot they had. Whereas I get the feeling that you probably had quite a few options and could have gone down the academic route if you'd have fancied it.
Yeah, I think obviously, you know, particularly back in the days. I mean, you know, talk about a little bit of racism, and it was a little bit harder back in those days. And I think I realised going into the working environment back in the days that, you know, sometimes, you know, you're going to find things a little bit harder, you know, and particularly for me,
Yeah,
when you step into the ring, it's one against one. You can control your
yeah,
destiny between you, and
leveler.
so that's what really appealed to me about you know, about boxing.
Boxing. It's interesting you mentioned racism. Several decades ago, because I remember Errol Christie, God rest his soul, he used to say to some of the youngsters, from ethnic backgrounds that he would come into contact with at the gym box, for instance, he'd say, "You young boys don't know what it was like." He said, "You don't know you're born." He said, "You know, today it is completely different." He said, "You don't know what we had to deal with." Do you ever feel that way when you talk to younger people, or you look at younger people, that it's
Almost definitely, I think, you know, because
crazy contrast?
obviously being a student of the game, I think, you know, I look at the people who came before me, you know, and what they had to do. The people like Lloyd Hannigan, you
Bunny
know,
Sterling and
Bunny Sterling, yeah, Bunny Sterling, Bunny Johnson, people like that. They paved the way, and they had it really, really hard, and they made it easier from, you know, for the generations coming through. And I think if that's the way it's got to be, you know, every generation you've got to try and do your little bit to make it easier for the people coming behind you.
So when you turn pro, I'm quite interested in your managerial setup, because you were managed by Jonathan Rendell, who people know. He's from a different background. He's not from he boxed at university, I believe. Jonathan. He was a
Jonathan
writer.
was actually he was actually my advisor, you know.
Okay.
But I make the distinction between it because, you know, as a person, I've always been or like to be in control of my career. You know, when I decided to turn pro, I was initially managed by Terry Marsh. Um, you know, he was my initial manager because
Do you know what? I didn't know that. I should know that. I'm seeing Terry tomorrow. That's new to me, Colin. Go on.
yeah, when I first turned pro, Terry was my original manager, and you know, he was, you know, quite an intelligent fighter, and you know, he said to me, like, you can do it yourself. He said, "I'll come on board, I'll help you out, and down the line you can take over and do it yourself." And that's what the intention was. I think we had, three fights, I think, and Terry decided to try and get more involved in acting and that kind of stuff. So we parted ways. It was then when I met Jonathan, we had a conversation, and he was a great admirer of my style and everything. And he came on board to try and see what he could do. And like, you know, I was kind of very, very lucky because he was quite knowledgeable, had belief in my ability, and as a writer, I used to write for the Times. He got the respect of the boxing establishment, and we formed a really good partnership. And yeah, and I owe a lot to him.
It's funny you talk about the boxing establishment and Jonathan, because he ruffled some feathers, didn't he? He did that Dispatches program where he was looking at Mickey Duff for the cartel, you know, Jarvis Astaire
Mm.
and Mickey Duff in particular in that program. And I remember Mickey Duff wouldn't give him an interview, and he said, "Why would I want to talk to a prick like you?" You know, and you know, he was getting that kind of frosty response. Jarvis did speak to him, was a little bit more kind of accommodating, but it looked like Jonathan was one of those guys who had an eye on the exploitation of fighters and the crooked elements of the boxing industry, and it was something he was trying to expose. Did that affect you in any way?
Not really, because I think, you know, from a personal kind of view, I kind of like before I turned pro, I spoke to many fighters, former champions, to try and get their opinions, find out what mistakes they made. You know, the likes of, you know, Charlie Magri, Lloyd
Yeah.
Hannigan, Jimmy Mack. So many people like to find out what they said and what pitfalls they were ahead of me. And I was doing that in the hope of when my time came, hopefully I could not make the same mistakes and yeah, have a bit more control. And that for me was always the way. You know, and I've
Yeah.
always said, you know, self-management didn't mean that I did everything, but I had people around me and I could make that final decision. And I'm quite content in my life because whatever happened or happened afterwards, I can live with that because I know that ultimately
On
I was
you.
the one who made that decision.
So, what is the difference then between a manager and an advisor? Because you're an advisor to Hamza Shiraz, who we will also talk about in this interview. But what distinction do you make between an advisor and a manager, and in conjunction with your role with certain fighters in the past as well?
To be fair, for a manager, he can sign contracts on your behalf and do things, you know, act on your behalf. As an advisor, you haven't got that same kind of control.
Obviously.
Ultimately, you can only give advice and try and point people in the right direction, but you can't sign contracts on their behalf or do anything along that kind of line. So ultimately, you maintain, a lot more control when you've got someone as an advisor.
And how does an advisor get paid?
It all depends. I mean,
That's what I want to know, mate.
it all depends. Obviously, like every situation is different. Some people you're on, and hopefully when they make it, they'll look after you. Other times, they'll look after you as you go along. So, I think every situation is different.
Yeah, because I know Ambrose Mendy has certainly worked in an advisory capacity to a lot of fighters. 'Cause I remember interviewing Hamza last year, and initially I referred to you as his manager. He said, "No, Andy Ayling is my manager," so I am a little bit interested in how that whole role breaks down in practical terms. Going back to your own career, you were you were boxing at the Barking Theatre the night that Frank Warren got shot outside the venue. Do you what do you remember about that night? It must have been a bit of a bizarre situation for
Yeah.
you trying to get on with your job that night and knowing that the big incident occurred outside. I mean, what recollections do you have?
Yeah, it was a strange night, quite surreal, and obviously, like we were in there getting ready for the fight. I think I was topping the bill over in Barking, and people started coming through and saying, "Oh, someone's been shot," and then obviously we kind of like realised it was Frank, and we wondered how he is he going to die? Is he going to be okay? Is the show going to go on? And all those kind of questions. And yeah, it was quite strange. And then down the line, it transpired that Terry Marsh, my old manager, was the one who they actually charged
Arrested
with.
them.
Yeah, charged with
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's none of my business, but it's always fascinated me a little bit that situation and the Terry story, Frank's story and all of that. And who knows? I think it's one of those things that will ultimately people think they know what happened, but I think it will remain a mystery. Or I'm glad to say I did an interview with Terry quite recently, and I wondered if it might ruffle feathers at Queensbury, and it hasn't. I'm happy to say it's not been an issue. I've not heard anything about it, and I'm still getting invitations to Queensbury events, so it's all good. I mean, it's great to see Frank Warren doing so well as he is today. Because if you look at how powerful Frank Warren is now, you'd never have predicted that even 15 years ago. It looked like he was slightly winding down and Matchroom were taking over a little bit, and it really hasn't gone that way. But I'm not sure where this Turkey Al Sheikh and Dana White situation is going to lead us. Do you have any thoughts about that and what we can expect?
I don't think anybody really knows. I think Turkey has been kind of great for the game. He's kind of brought the fights that the public wanted. For too many years, you saw different sanctioning bodies, different promoters kind of going in different directions. They're not making those fights, and it's been kind of great to kind of see, all the fights that you dreamt about being made. Better be and Bivol, those kind of fights. It's been
Twice.
great. So like, I think he's been a fresh breath of fresh
Breath of
air
fresh
for
air. Yeah.
everybody. Yeah, for everybody. And hopefully we shall see where the future lies. I think everybody at the moment is quite unsure with Dana White and how that's going to impact on everybody else. But in the past, whatever Turkey's done has been really really good.
And you've been in the thick of it, haven't you? With Hamza, in the 5 versus 5 versus Austin Hammer Williams, obviously the world title challenge to Carlos Adames. So you've seen it up close. This new kind of Turkey Al Sheikh sponsored boxing revolution.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I went over to Riyadh for Hamza's last fight, the title challenge against Adames, and it was kind of great to see the promotion, and obviously the arena they had was slightly smaller than the one that they originally uh, had intended to have, and it was great because there was a great atmosphere there, and I think obviously for me, the best card that I've seen, you have so many great fights on there, so many great
Yeah,
fighters on there, and I was kind of like lucky and privileged to kind of be there and see everything in operation.
yeah. So back on your illustrious career again. The fight of yours that really did it for me. The performance I thought, God, that is poetry. That's beautiful. Was probably Gary Daru, the seventh round stoppage. I think it was 1990 or 91 for British title. But
Yeah,
that's the one that really did it for me. I mean, do you have a favourite that you
I
think that
think
was
I
the night I
think
was on fire?
I think that's got to be one of my favourites. I think a lot of people love that fight. Obviously, at the York Hall, and at the time, Gary was quite a dangerous puncher.
Yeah,
Avoided by a lot of people, and a lot of people thought I was going to lose that one. So
yeah,
you know, I boxed really well that night, and it's funny enough, we become really good friends. We kind of like always catch up on each other every couple of months. We touch base and find out how we're doing. And yeah, that's what I love about boxing, where 1 minute you're fighting, with someone life and death, and then next minute, you're friends again. So we've got a good relationship, and that was a special fight for me because it kind of, as an amateur, I was London champion 4 times, and I lost on 2 split decisions in the ABA finals and that, so I never became a champion. So
yeah.
for me
No, sure, yeah.
to actually become a British champion was a great start, a great, for me, a great point in my life where you become a champion of the country, and it's something which nobody can take away from you.
And on the subject of them not being able to take it away from you, I believe I've seen it with my own eyes. I think you've got 2 Lonsdale belts.
Yeah, I've got 2 London belts. I think I regained the British Championship, quite a few years later,
Yeah,
and they allowed me to keep it. So I've got two Lonsdale belts. I was quite lucky there.
yeah, because you couldn't ordinarily you couldn't get more than 1 Lonsdale belt in your era because Henry Cooper had 3 famously, and then they suddenly decided they're pretty costly to make, aren't they? Because it really is a grandiose piece of hardware, and consequently they put in a rule that you couldn't have more than one. But somehow Sweet C manages to get 2, which is quite a bonus. But what's the world title win against Mauricio Stecker at the Alexandra Pavilion in, I believe it was May 1992. What I mean, was that the crowning glory and the defining moment?
I think I've got to say yes, really, because as a 15-year-old, that's my dream, to go out there to become a world champion. And as I said before, one of my earlier objectives was to go to the Olympics, like Muhammad Ali and Sugar, and get a gold medal, and then go in there to become a champion. I didn't
Yeah,
go to the Olympics, even though I was in the Olympic squad. I lost to Dave Anderson, and when he won the decision over me in the ABA, they sent him to the Olympics. So to fight someone like Mauricio Stecker, who at the time, I think 45 fights, 44 wins, 40 former Olympic champion, and I
yeah.
think he got the Val Barker Award for the box of the Olympics. So to beat him, in the way which I did, was a kind of great time for me.
Well,
It made up for not going to the Olympics.
he was the 1984 Olympic champion, right? From the Los Angeles Olympics, right? Was it 84 or was it 88?
I'm not. No, not 88 or 88 or 84. I'm not sure. I'm not too sure. I'm not
The
too
only
sure, to be
reason,
fair.
being a boxing anorak, I'm going to say 1984, the Val Barker winner was actually Paul Gonzalez, the light flyweight, I
Okay,
believe, before John Lyon. But Mauricio Stecker, you know what? It
lucky
may
that
have been
then.
88. We
88,
can
88
probably
more than likely.
we can
Yeah.
probably check it. 1 second. I have figures in front of me. There's box amateur Mauricio Stecker. Bear with me. Hector Lopez. It was 84. Yeah, it was 84. It was the
Oh,
1984 Olympic final. He won it by 4-1. It was the bantamweight final, yeah. Because remember, Steve McCrory was the US representative at bantamweight, I think, Milton McCrory's
okay,
brother. But
okay.
I'm pretty sure I will check it later. But I think the Val Barker winner was Paul Gonzalez because I remember some pro pundit, whoever it was, it may have been Bert Sugar, but probably not. But he was talking about the Val Barker winner in the 1984 Olympics, and before it happened, he says you can bet the amateur guys will give it to some guy who couldn't break an egg. They won't give it to anyone who's a puncher who's got more of a pro style. So, and then when Gonzalez get it, he said, "Well, see, that's what I told you as much." But so, Colin, you know what? I was just watching the Palacio fight. I'm sure it's not something I'm sure you watch many times to give yourself a feel good factor and a shot of caffeine in the morning. But I was watching it just to get because I'm not sure I've ever watched it all the way through. And I thought once you'd won a world title, I obviously thought you were going to be a bit special, like an era-defining fighter for British boxing. And I anticipated a long reign and an illustrious career from there. And then it went wrong that night against the Colombian for various reasons. You had the dislocated shoulder. You were ahead on points at the time, but he was a handful. I'd say the third round, it looked like he had you not too dramatic, but a little bit of bother under pressure on the ropes. Did that
Yeah, yeah. He was
did that
rough. He
ruin
was tough.
everything? Did not everything, but did it ruin the trajectory, which could have been even brighter
Yeah, yeah.
still.
To be fair, I mean, my career, I know that I could have gone on to a bigger and better things, and I didn't reach my full potential.
No.
With Palacio, I didn't say I underestimated him, but obviously at that time I'd looked really good against Decker. We were looking at Paul Hutchinson for a unification fight, so my eyes were a little bit looking on that in the future, and he was a handful. To be fair, I always knew before anybody in that top 10, when you get to that level, they're all going to be dangerous. But he was rough, he was quite tough, a little bit dirty.
Yeah.
And I think he caught me in there a couple of times, and I got my respect without a doubt. But I always felt in control. I mean, obviously, if you look at the fight, even in the later part of the fight, I was coming on strong, and I'm sure I would have gone out there or finished off and done the job. But I think it was the seventh or eighth round, he came out and I went to throw a left hook. He came underneath and lifted up, and as he did, my shoulder popped out. And obviously, I tried to fight on for a little bit longer, but they stopped the fight. But he was rough and tough. But had that not happened, I'm sure that my
You would
career
have taken care of it.
would have gone. Yeah, I would have taken over and gone on to bigger and better things. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be.
Did that affect you going forward, in terms of your enthusiasm and desire for boxing or for greatness and your legacy? Did that change something inside of you?
No, not at all. Because as I say, I mean, it was a fight where I was ahead on all three scorecards,
Mm.
and it was just at that time I thought it was just an injury. And as a fighter, you always have injuries. You take some time, you recover, and then come again. But at the time, I didn't realise just how serious it was. Um, I,
It affected you thereafter, right? It affected you
yeah,
continually.
yeah, it was never the same. I mean, I can look back on it now and realise it was never the same after that, because obviously at the time I was trying to let it heal naturally. We started training, and like during the training, it kind of it's called subluxation, which means it kind of pops in and pops back out. So I
Yes.
knew that I needed some kind of some kind of further surgery. I had a metal pin put in there that didn't work, and eventually I had to go to America to have keyhole surgery, which made it a lot better. But deep down, I knew after that injury, I was never the same. At world class level, you're talking at split seconds, and
Yeah. Yeah.
those are the things which I lost after that injury.
And then after, so I understand that it wasn't a psychic thing. It was a physical thing that hampered you going
I
forward.
think it was a bit of both. I mean, physically, you lose a little bit of snap and everything else, and where over the times after the injury, it actually, as I say, it sublux, which came in and out. You kind of get that thing in your head that you can't. You've got to be very correct with your punches. Anything a little bit funny, you run the risk of it kind of coming out again. So it became a psychological thing too. So he was never going
Yeah.
to be the same fighter, unfortunately.
Next time out was the title challenge to Steve Robinson, because interestingly, Palacio never fought again. He certainly did less than you did after that night. I don't remember, or I don't remember. I don't know what his story was after that. But you got the shot against Steve Robinson next. I mean, certainly, I would think in my head, I think of the sum of parts of Colin Mcmillan versus the sum of parts of Steve Robinson, and I pick Colin Mcmillan every time. But what was the story of that one for you?
The problem for the Steve Robinson fight was, as I said, I didn't have a warm up before the Steve Robinson fight, because I realised that I had a metal pin put in my shoulder, that
Yeah.
I was sparring with Johnny Armour at the time, and it kind of came in and out, and I knew that it wasn't 100%, but I believed that I had the ability, even if one hand, to beat Steve Robinson, and I knew would have to get further surgery done on it. But when I took that fight, I knew it was going to be a tough one, but as I said, I believed in my ability and thought that even if what I had, it would be enough. And it was a close fight, tough fight, but it didn't go my way. And literally, I think 2 weeks after that, before the fight, I booked a trip to America to get microsurgery on the shoulder, which was a lot better than it was before.
Yeah. You fought on for a few years after that. It didn't lose again until the final fight, which was, I believe, it was early January, a British title shot versus Paul Ingle. Did you make the decision after that loss that was it immediate your sense of okay, I'm going to hang them up now? That's it for me.
I think I've lost you. I got you.
You got me? Sorry, did it cut out there?
Yeah, I can't seem to find you actually at the moment.
Yeah, are we there? I've got
No,
you.
I can't see you actually. Huh.
Interesting. You, I can still see you, and I think the show is still showing what it needs to show. You still hear me?
Okay. No,
Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You can still hear me. It's strange that that's happened, but yeah. So did you decide immediately after the Paul Ingle loss in January 1997 that it was time to hang the gloves up?
The point of the fight, yeah, because I mean, I'm glad after the fight. I think I was going to say something, but like Johnny Ashton, one of my trainers, he said to me, take your time, and I'm glad he did, and sit back, go ahead, and reevaluate and look at things, and I was able to kind of go away, and I've always said I don't want to be a punching bag for anybody. My aim is always to go out there to be number one, to be the best, and after that fight, it showed me that something wasn't as it used to be. Paul Ingle was a very, talented fighter, very strong, very fit, very hungry. And I said I didn't want to hang about and, be a punching bag for anybody else. So for me, it was the time to call it a day. And I always said that, once I've done that, I don't want to be, coming back, making a comeback here. It's just time to move on and go in search of other things, other goals.
Oh, and other things turned out to be management, amongst other things for you. You landed a pretty big coup a few years later in 2000 when you signed Olympic champion Audley Harrison to a deal, and you started to look after his career, right?
Yeah, as I say, I've always been a fighter who, you know, I know how hard boxing can be, and I like to see fighters in control and making the best that they can do for their career. With Audley, he was a sharp guy, and I wouldn't say I managed his career. I was more like an advisor.
Yeah,
I came on board to kind of help him, navigate him, and he took things to another level. He wanted to not just be in control of his career, but also on a promotional side of it, and he was quite a threat to the boxing establishment. So he was
established.
always going
Yeah.
to be a big ask and a big yeah, a bigger, a tough thing to do.
Well, it's interesting because Audley, at the time, Audley was being criticised for trying to run his own show and handle everything in house. And people were saying the reason he wasn't looking like $1 million in his early fights, and some of those fights seem to have a negative impact on his kind of popularity with the public after the gold medal win, because he was fighting ordinary fighters in 6 round main events on BBC television, and I think people expected a bit more, which was perhaps not reasonable to expect more, but it didn't really work out as well as it might have done for him, and people criticized him and said the reason is he's not focusing on being a boxer, he's trying to be everything. But I think if you look at the way things are now, Audley was a bit of a pioneer with that, wasn't he?
Oh, most definitely. Audley took it to the next level. Obviously, I wanted to try and control my career, but he took it and he wanted to actually be a promoter at the same time, which was very, very a brave move. And I think we speak now, and he's happy that he took that path, and he tried to do it his own way. It didn't work out, but as I say, he was, European champion. He done well from the sport, and no, I think he serves as an inspiration for other fighters to kind of go out there and push the barriers and try and go as far as you can go.
And I believe he's now moved into management. He's looking to move fighters just recently, he announced.
Yeah, I spoke to Wally, and I know he's looking for fighters out there. He wants to try and get in the management game and try and take a few fighters and try and pass on his advice, his experience, and that, and hopefully he'll do well.
I spoke to you at the York Hall. I reckon it was about, I don't know, maybe 2005 ish, maybe 20 years ago now. Time really does fly. And at the time, you seemed a bit over the whole idea of managing fighters. When I asked you about it, then you said it's so much work. I don't know if it would have to be such a special fighter to commit to, because you said it's a hell of a lot of work to do unless you're absolutely convinced of the property that the hot property that you've got. Did you lose your enthusiasm for the business side of boxing back then in that particular period?
I think you realise that boxing's a lot of politics. It's and to actually make it, to make money from it, as a fighter or manager or anything, it's very, very difficult. I think so many people in
Yeah.
boxing love the sport, but to make it financially viable is sometimes something very, very difficult. And sometimes with the politics of the whole sport, there was a period where I kind of wanted to stay away from it, but I do tend to kind of get dragged back into it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who who I know, and I kind of respect what I've done, and they want to kind of use me and use my help and advice, in certain ways. It's good for me because it's not, when I say a full management where you've got to be on it all the time. It's a kind of niche which I've kind of created, which
Yeah.
is kind of good. It's kind of like I can give them help, give them advice, and it's beneficial to both of us, all
Have
of
you
us.
done other things over the? Have you done other things, to earn a crust or to create revenue streams away from boxing over the years?
Well, to be fair, I mean that's one of the things you know I try and impress upon all fighters is about looking after your money. So obviously I've got a few decent paydays. With that, I invested my money in property. So I've
Yeah.
got some property, stuff like that. And I've always been, working on various projects. And, I was a promotions manager for a nightclub at one time and publicist for a boxing organisation back in the day. So I've done loads of things, but I've always been involved with boxing. I love it. And fortunately, I'm still here.
We have a question from a gentleman who's watching live right now who says, if I remember correctly, Colin is good friends with Michael Watson. That was the question
Yeah,
he asked you.
yeah,
Yeah.
my country, Mike from my era, and going through the amateurs together. I used to be at York when he was fighting, and we both seen each other kind of go through. And people like Mike, just to hear his story and what he's done, how he's kind of come back, and he's definitely the people's champion. Obviously, he had his 60th birthday party, a couple of weeks back,
Yeah.
and that was kind of great. And to see how positive he is and how inspirational he is a great thing. And but it also at the same time it highlights the dangers of boxing. I remember people like Michael, like Roy Douglas, Mark Galt, Bradley Stone. People have to realise that boxing's not a game. And that's why for me I always try and help whichever fighters I'm working with, because the whole idea is to kind of get in there, try and achieve your dreams, become a champion, make some money, and get out. You don't want to hang about in boxing too long because it's a dangerous game.
Yeah. I think also a lot of damage is done in the gym, right? When you see I mean, obviously, Michael got injured in a fight famously with the rematch of Chris Eubank Senior. But so I think a lot of damage is done in the gym. Would you say when people have certain sparring protocols or maybe take too many shots in that time
Yeah,
when they're training?
definitely. I think sometimes a lot of fighters, as you say, that all the damage is done in the gym and sparring every day, hard sparring, wars every day. That's not always their way to do it. You've got to have people around you who look after your long-term interests. You've got to know when to step it up and when to ease it down. You want to make sure that when you finish your boxing career, your health and is intact.
Did you have anyone in particular, a sparring partner that you always used to go to war with? That you tend to have that ding dong with when you traded blows in the gym?
Not really, because I said for me, sparring was all about learning. I mean, you had good technical spars. I had guys that sometimes a bit bigger than me, like myself and Duke McKenzie used to spar. We had like real competitive spars, thinking spars. So you would get people like that, and I think it's just about working on certain things and sharpening up. You don't really have too many wars in that gym because it's not good for you.
Who would you say was the best fighter you ever sparred with?
Ooh.
Your opinion.
I don't know. I mean, Jake McKenzie was a world champion. He was very, very sharp, very good. We had some good fights together. There's a fighter from Liverpool called Nigel Wenton back in the day.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was he
Richie's
was he
brother.
was
Yeah.
yeah, he was good fighter. He's a lightweight, bit bigger than me. He was good. Michael Ayers, another lightweight, but he was
Michael
big,
Ayers.
but
Yeah.
very,
Beat
very
Colin Dunn.
strong. Yeah, very strong. Kelsey Banks was the world number one, and when I went to America, I sparred with him. He was quite good. So yeah,
Some
I've had a
amateur, Kelsey.
yeah, good fighter, world amateur number one. So there've been quite a few good guys I've kind of like been in the ring with, and yeah, held my own. with all of them.
How about in the pro career, or even amateur or pro, the best fighter you ever shared a ring with in competition, in your opinion?
It's difficult because there are, different types of fights. Some fights are
Problems, yeah.
physically hard. Some are just like mentally, you've got to be on your game. Like Mauricio Stecker, technically very, very good. You've got to be, clever and, sharp, out thinking all the time. And someone like Palacio, for example, was very, very strong, rugged, a little bit
Yeah.
dirty. But I mean, he kind of gave me maybe one of my hardest fights, Palacio. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny as well, isn't it? Because when people talk about punching power and they say who hit you the hardest, do you think it's true to say there's different kinds of power? There's different ways in which you can get hit hard, and they feel different. Like some guys are heavy-handed, some guys, will buzz you. Some guys it just hurts you every shot they seem to connect with. It's solid. There's different
Yeah.
kinds of power, isn't there?
Yeah, I think some people, like for example Hamza, are just punchers. They work. He's a tremendous worker, and when he hits you, you know about it. He's a puncher, can take you out with a couple of shots. Whereas myself, I mean, people used to say I'm not really a puncher, but
No.
if you spoke to people I actually fought, they would all say to you, "Oh, I can hit you hard enough to get your respect," and you know about it.
Yeah. And,
And
people said that about Duke McKenzie too. Peter Buckley said that, who you both fought, the legendary journeyman. He
yeah.
said that Duke could really hurt you with a shot, even a jab. He said, but people
Yeah,
didn't realise
yeah,
that.
realize that. Yeah, sometimes unless my philosophy has always been, chip, chip, chip. You break someone down, and then later on in the fight, you can kind of go and put your feet on the ground and let your shots go a little bit harder. But that's all the way.
So,
Really went.
so in closing, let's talk about Hamza, because initially I approached you to do an interview right after the draw with Carlos Adames back on February 22nd in Riyadh, and it's because it's not quite so topical. A few weeks later, I didn't start the interview with that, but it was controversial. The draw. Most people felt he was rather lucky to get the draw. Now the dust has settled and you've had a chance to review the fight. What is your takeaways from it?
To be fair, I still think, like the judges, I thought it was a close fight. He was covering up a lot. Punches actually getting through. There wasn't much in it. Obviously, he had the hand injury and badly damaged and that. He didn't fight as he normally does. But at the same time, I can understand the view that if you're trying to fight for a championship, you've got to take it from the champion. And there was very, very close fight. So I can understand the people who believe that Adames was the rightful winner.
And I believe there won't be an immediate rematch, it would appear, and that Hamza is very much intent on moving up to 168 pounds going forward. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think obviously Hamza's big for the weight, and obviously he's finding it hard to make middleweight. So I think that's the future. It's going to be at super middleweight, and he's going to go on from there. I mean, obviously, I still think he's a tremendous talent. Obviously, I see a lot of his sparring and that, so I know how good he is and how good he can be. And I think obviously that will be that will be shown in time.
Yeah, and aside from Hamza, who you advise, you're also either managing or advising young Billy Adams, right?
Yeah, I've got Billy Adams, like with his 5-0 at the moment, tremendous talent. He was due to go to the Olympics, but he couldn't make the weight, and because of the girls coming into the Olympics, there wasn't no weight above him. So it would have been 2 weights we had to jump. So we decided to turn pro. He's 5-0, tremendous talent. I think he's fighting April 19th, and one to watch in the future. I've got young Umar Khan, who's Hamza's cousin. He won the WBC youth title recently, so he's going to be out in June or July. He's doing really, really well. 10-11-0 at the moment, undefeated. I'm talking to Lewis Richardson, who won the bronze at the Olympics, so I'm more than likely going to be working with him when he decides to turn pro. So I've got a nice, I'd say, four guys I'm kind of like working with and trying to give them a bit of help and advice, and looking forward to the future.
And is that the deal, Colin? That you're not necessarily signing them to managerial contracts, but you're acting as advisor. Is that the model that you have in place with all of them?
Yeah, for all of them. Yeah, I mean it depends. Everyone is slightly different. Some is more like a consultancy. I'll just help them out wherever I can. Others it's a bit more involved. But they're all 4 of them are all talented fighters, and it's not only about the boxing side of it; it's about life after boxing, how to try and prepare for, because boxing's only a short part of your life after boxing, and making sure you don't get carried away for all the hype, and you keep your feet on the ground, and hopefully look after the money that you make, so that when you are no longer boxing, you can still live comfortably.
I get the impression with you talk about life after boxing, and you mentioned Charlie Magri earlier, and mistakes that he may feel he made amongst other fighters. I get the feeling with guys like Charlie that they never really found that sense of definition of who they are after boxing left them. They never found anything to replace it. With yourself, I get the impression that you made the transition a little bit easier into retirement and post boxing life, and still involved in the game. And I get the impression that you're not nursing any ghosts of the past, and you're actually quite happy and content, and you don't wish for those days to come back. Is that am I on the right track?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, you do find a lot of bitter fighters who are not happy with how
Yeah,
their career panned out, and the advice that they were given, the money that they made, and with me, as I said earlier, because I made a final decision, I'm quite happy with what happened for me. I know in my heart of hearts that there was a lot more to offer, but it wasn't meant to be. But I think one thing you've got to try and instill upon all fighters is, boxing's a very, very short career. You've got to think about your future after it, and plan for that future. Ultimately, you want to be able to enjoy it. Your health is the most important thing. And with me, it's all about, setting new goals. Once I finished my boxing career, it was about moving on and finding, new mountains to climb. And I'm quite lucky. I'm quite content and quite happy in the way that my life is kind of going.
absolutely. Well, Colin, it's always wonderful to get a chance to speak to you. I particularly appreciate this 47 minutes and counting on a Wednesday morning. I think you are a shining example of a fighter who's made a success out of the game and used boxing to his advantage rather than letting boxing use him.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, my favourite British fighters of all time, you're probably number two. Probably Curtin and Lang, just because he was so quirky and different. I mean, I think you're probably a much more savvy individual in terms of negotiating life in general. But I had a soft spot for, more than a soft spot for Kirk, just because of his kind of really offbeat genius. But after that, I would say it's Sweet C coming in at number two. For
Thank you
what
very
it's
much.
worth, thank you as always for taking the time to talk to me. I look forward to seeing you out and about as usual, and I hope you have a
One other
wonderful
thing
day.
before you go, I would like to say, obviously, I've set up a GoFundMe page for my good friend Tony Cisse.
Yes.
Obviously, he's got motor neuron disease, and we are trying to raise some money throughout the boxing community. Obviously, he's
Yeah.
got some tough times ahead, so we want to try and raise as much money as we can to try and help him along. So I think normally I do like a couple of amateur shows a year,
Yeah.
raise some charity events, and we've got one in October the 3rd. We're going to try to raise some money for my own amateur boxing club, Barking, and also for Tony. So I'd say if you are able to support him, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. Sweet C, always a champion forever. Normally, the old StreamYard technology meant I could press stop and then we could still have a quick chat, to say goodbye in the back line. It doesn't do that now. It just kicks us straight out. So I'll say goodbye now. Thanks so much, champ.
No
And
worries.
I will see you very soon, I hope. Thank you.
No
Cheers,
doubt. Take
guys.
care. Bye bye.